The expression of the two became funny and somehow weird in that Jack himself wondered if there was something strange that he just said. What's wrong with that look on your faces? Have I not just stated that there's $1 billion in the card for the operations of the department? Why are you looking at me in such a way? Jack thought to himself. It was only after about a minute, when Jack was almost getting tired of holding his hand in the air, that the duo came out of their shock. Of course, the tiredness that Jack felt was simply the impatience, nothing more. Grace hurriedly stood up on her feet as she received the card with trembling hands. After all, this card contained over $1 billion in it. This was an amount that she'd never had a chance to get a hold of at once. Although if the money that had passed through her hands was added, it could reach it, it was different to have all of this amount in her hands at the same time. Her heart trembled a little as she looked at Jack. This guy had not only trusted her by entrusting the entire department to her, he was even giving her $1 billion funds. This in itself made her determined to ensure that the department succeeded, just like how Jack wanted. She gave Jack another bow as she said, "Thank you, boss, for your trust. I won't fail you." Determination could be felt from her voice. This accompanied by the look in her eyes, Jack knew that she was serious about what she had said. Although Jack was handing over everything in the department to be under her management, it was not that he trusted her. After all, who could trust another person when they had met in less than an hour? It was just that he decided to put his faith in her character and Celine's choice. As for Celine, he wasn't sure why he himself trusted Celine, although they had only recently met. But even if his faith failed him and Grace eloped with all the money, he wasn't worried at all. He would just have to invest another amount of money, and at the same time, there would be no way that he would let her leave just like that. In the future, once his connections were big enough, he was sure that he would be able to find her no matter where she was hiding. And then, he would make sure that he punished her. After all, how could he accept someone messing with him? As for now, since she thought that he trusted her, he wouldn't change her mind at all. It would be good for her to think that he trusted her so that she could reveal her real character if the present one was a facade. No need for that. Just do your work well. And by the way, don't be afraid of spending the money that I've given out. Spend it to ensure that the department soars. Jack said. After seeing that the duo were in agreement, he added, all the income that comes from the daily sales, you don't need to send them to me. Just reinvest them back into the department to support the development. All that I'll want to see would be the monthly reports, that's all. Grace and Chris nodded in unison. They could feel that their boss was quite generous. They were about to leave when Jack stated, "Grace, stay behind first." Grace nodded before sitting back on the chair. Chris, on the other hand, left after giving Jack a bow. He felt that Jack had done him a great favor. As a manager, his biggest pride would be to see the business that was under his management reaching the sky. Now that he'd gotten a good boss that wasn't afraid of spending, he had already began looking forward to the future where he would be known as a manager of a big brand. After Chris left, Jack stated, "You'll start with a monthly salary of $150,000. When the department develops further, you'll get an increase. What do you think?" Grace wasn't expecting that she would receive such a big salary. After all, according to what she knew, this was just the start in a small city. If the department grew further, she surely would have a bigger income and reputation. "Thank you, boss." For now, Grace could only say these words. But in her heart, she swore that she would ensure that she did her best to make sure that the department that she was in charge of reached higher lengths. Another thing, there are two of my first employees in Yellow Street. They are Agnes and Charles. These two, I promised them that I would promoted them. So, they should be in charge of the specific department in Yellow and Alpine Streets. But of course, in the future, if their performance is poor, you can do what needs to be done. Jack said. As for George, after knowing his background, he needed some reconsiderations about what to do when his period of the bed agreement came to an end. At first, Grace's expression changed to that of uncertainty. But when she heard Jack's last statement, her expression eased a lot. She had almost thought that Jack preferred relationships to performance. Turns out that she was thinking too much. So, she nodded in agreement. There's a car that I've come with. It's a Bentley Bentayga. There are several of them where I live. They belong to your department. So, you can see how they are going to be distributed. Furthermore, there are others that are going to be in charge of the deliveries, Cascadia Freightliners. The ones that I ordered would be coming within this week. After a few more instructions, Jack drafted a contract and they signed before Grace left. Jack had also made sure to inform her that the subordinates of the enterprise would have the bonuses as long as they performed well. This was a decision that he'd come with to make sure that none of his subordinates decided to give up after seeing that their efforts were not appreciated. Looking at the time, it was already more than 20 minutes past 10. So, he decided to go out as Gabriel Wadi was arriving on this specific day. He still had a trip to make to Venture City. The earlier that he left, the better it would be. So, he took out his phone and contacted Pilot Gabriel. "Hello, Mr. Jackson?" An uncertain male voice resounded in his ears from the phone. "Yes, Pilot Gabriel, I wonder where you're now?" Jack asked. "I'm just about to enter in Kuwait City." Gabriel replied. "You're using a taxi, or are you driving?" Jack asked again. "Oh, I'm in a taxi," Gabriel replied, wondering what was wrong. "Okay then. Tell the driver to take you to Wind Hill Residential Area and bring you to the Prince and Princess Palace. After getting there, you can call me." Jack said. "Okay then," Gabriel replied. After the call ended, Jack called the captain of the guards back at the mansion and instructed him that he should let Gabriel in when he arrived there. After that, he wondered what to do next. After thinking things through, he decided to just go back to the palace and change the clothes that he was wearing. After all, currently, he was only wearing casual clothes. Since he was going to discuss a business deal, he thought that it wouldn't hurt to wear official clothing. So, he got out of the office and drove the Bentayga towards the palace. When he arrived, he found that Gabriel had already arrived. In fact, he had just arrived and entered the palace about a minute before Jack arrived. As expected, his phone rang not long after. "Hello, Mr. Jackson. I've already arrived," Gabriel said. "I'll be there in about a minute," Jack replied as he drove the car into the compound. The moment that he approached the garage, he found that Gabriel was busy staring at the Eurocopter that was on the garage's roof. The moment that he noticed that a car was approaching, he turned his gaze towards it. Jack alighted after parking the car next to the others. After that, he headed towards Gabriel and shook his hand as he asked, "What do you think about that machine?" "It looks good. It should be new, right?" Gabriel's eyes when it came to aircrafts was quite good. He had already noticed that the Eurocopter was new. Jack wondered what he would think after seeing that the Eurocopter had traveled 0 miles. Jack then led the way to the garage and opened the staircase that led to the roof. Just like on Friday night, the floor shifted as the cars were moved to the side, revealing the staircase and the pathway that extended from the ground to the ceiling. Gabriel was amazed by the level of technology here. This was a level that could be found in the big cities the size of the capital city or in the cities of those giant countries. After that, the two went up to the roof. After seeing the Eurocopter from such a short distance, Gabriel was even more amazed by it. He could already tell that it was a customized one. This Eurocopter should be worth at least $150 million. Gabriel exclaimed in shock after Jack did the introduction about the Eurocopter. Gabriel shouted these words the moment that he heard about Eco and what it could do. Jack, on the other hand, was quite surprised that the system had given his such an expensive aircraft. After all, the first-time reward of the stores was only a bike worth about $170,000. But now, this reward was worth more than 2 Bugatti Veyron sports cars that he had received from the system. Jack, of course, tried ignoring Gabriel's fanatic gaze as he looked at the Eurocopter. He simply left him there to get familiar with it and went back to the mansion to change into the white suit that was made from cashmere. When he came back, he found that Gabriel had already gotten familiar with the aircraft with the help of Eco. Furthermore, he had already changed from his casual clothes to his pilot uniform. After Jack got into the Eurocopter, he sat next to Gabriel with the intention of learning from him how to fly a plane. After a series of buttons that looked like a riddle to Jack, the plane flew into the air as it left the palace grounds. But, at that moment, Jack noticed something strange. He seemed to be capable of remembering each and every action and button that Gabriel had taken and pressed. Jack wasn't sure about the reason behind this, but there was one thing that he was sure about on his mind, that was that his memory was better than before. As he tried thinking, he suddenly found that he could clearly remember almost everything that had happened since the moment that he received the advance reward. Although it wasn't to the extent of having a photographic memory, he could still remember most of the important details. Now, he couldn't hold his curiosity anymore and asked, "Angel, do you know why I can suddenly remember almost everything that happened yesterday from the moment that I received the advance reward?" "That's normal. Being a professional combatant, you need to have such a memory. In fact, this is developed as long as you improve. The more you improve, the better your senses, your physical quality, and so is the enhancement of the internal body organs. The brain was improved due to this." Angel's reply made Jack somehow surprised. He then wondered if he could get photographic memory as long as he trained further and become far stronger than he was now. "Forget about that. You don't even know how strong you're right now. How can you improve? What are you improving? You don't know what weaknesses there on your body, but you're already dreaming about becoming even stronger? How's that possible?" The system's guardian never minced its words at all and gave Jack a jab to the jaw. As a result, Jack held his chin as he fell into deep thoughts. He was just thinking of how to know his current maximum strength when he suddenly remembered something. He was supposed to pay attention to how Gabriel was flying the Eurocopter. He might as well know a thing or two so that he could fly it in times of emergencies. After all, he wasn't expecting that Gabriel would always be present the moment that he wanted to go somewhere. As he observed how he was operating, Jack could clearly remember everything that Gabriel was doing. But at the end of the day, he didn't understand why such a button was pressed or why a certain switch was flicked. So, at the end of it all, he decided to give up on it as he rested while enjoying the scenery on the way. He had never toured his own country in the 19 years of his life. In fact, they were all spent in Crystal City and in Koet City. This would be the first time that he could observe the landscape of the country. In Koet City as well as Crystal City were located in the Western Province. In Azima Country, there were 5 provinces, the 4 cardinal points as well as the Central Province. Jack was in the Western Province. The capital of Azima Country was found in the Central Province. When it came to the difference in terms of development, Central Province was like a giant city, while the Western Province was like a small town. All of this was something that Jack had learnt during the days that he was still in school. As he looked at the lush trees, hills, and streams as the Eurocopter flew forward, Jack suddenly remembered that there was something that he hadn't done yet. That was booking a place that he would be staying for the night. After all, Venture City was located at the far end of the Western Province, closer to the Central Province. So, the distance was long, and even when flying, he would take at least 4 hours to reach it. They had left at around 11. They would arrive at around 3 p.m. in the very least. As Jack thought of this, he suddenly had an idea. Why not simply stay in the hotel that he would be meeting with Edwin? With that thought, he decided to send him a message through TM, or in full, text me. This was the most famous chatting platform in Azima Country and several other neighboring countries. "Hello, Mr. Edwin. Where are we meeting?" Not long after he sent the text, there was a reply from Edwin. "Let's meet at the Cloudy Restaurant. I wonder at what time you're arriving." Jack read the text and replied, "I'll be there by 3:45 p.m. if there are no accidents. I'll be waiting." And with that, the chatting ended. Jack relaxed as he thought to himself how long he was going to spend at Venture City. According to his thought process, it wouldn't be bad to spread his wings in Venture City as well. Currently, it can be said that in Koet City, things have been stabilized. Now, what remained would be to ensure that the grocery department was well known there in Koet City by creating a good reputation for it. If there was a competition, he had his own means of defeating them. If the normal means failed, he would just lower the price and sell them at the exact price that he'd bought. He was sure that none of those that wanted to compete with him would be able to reduce the price. After all, the moment that they did that, their income won't be able to make up for their losses. Of course, such means could only be applied to those that tried provoking him. If not, he would just follow the normal means by competing in terms of quality of the products as well as service. Just at this moment, he thought of another thing. That's right, Blue City was just along the way to Venture City. So, by the time that he would be coming back, he would just pass by and collect all the shares that were in Ben's hands. Of course, he knew that by the time that he came back, he would be late by a few days, but that wouldn't stop him from collecting the debt that others owed him. Furthermore, he was quite curious about how the system was going to multiply the shares, considering the fact that the shares were also part of the income that he'd earned from betting with Ben. As Jack's thoughts drifted hours flashed by. It was only when they were closing in on Venture City that Jack suddenly remembered that he hadn't eaten yet. It seemed that he wasn't the only one that had forgotten about the food. After all, Gabriel left in Coet City a few minutes after arriving. At that time, he was quite curious about the Eurocopter and was impatient in that he wanted to fly it right away. On the other hand, Jack was quite looking forward on the new company that he was going to take over. As such, the two excited men flew out of the city, forgetting that the journey that they were going on was going to be long. Furthermore, other than the water that was in the helicopter, none of them carried food with them. Jack could only sigh at how careless he was. He had forgotten even the basic thing that a human body needed. Furthermore, now that his physique had been enhanced, his appetite had greatly been increased. He decided that he would just make sure that he ate all that could be eaten the moment that he arrived in the restaurant till he satiated his hunger. Not long after, he saw high-rise buildings appearing in the horizon. He could already tell that they were approaching Venture City. You can just land wherever we are allowed to land. After that, we can simply take a cab to the location, the Cloudy Restaurant. Jack spoke as he saw the tall buildings getting bigger the closer they got. Got it, Gabriel replied. He had been here several times when he was flying some clients of Skyflight charters. So, he was quite familiar with this city. Not long after they arrived at the city, Jack could clearly see that the buildings here were by far bigger and longer than those that were found in Crystal City, not to mention in Coet City. The skyscrapers had at least 100 floors. So, compared to these buildings here, Jack's business overlord building was just like a normal cabin as compared to a mansion or a villa. Gabriel was immediately fascinated by the buildings here and decided that he would move here and make it his base. After all, not only was the population here bigger than in Coet City, the businesses that he could buy here were many. Gabriel flew the plane and landed it inside an airstrip. In this city, there was an airport and 2 airstrips. Of course, these airstrips were mainly for those with private aircrafts, just like Jack's Eurocopter. As long as one had money, they could land their plane here. On the other hand, Coet City had no airstrip, let alone an airport. Jack shook his head as he thought of how far behind Coet City was. After they landed, Jack got out of the plane as he asked Gabriel, "Are you coming with me for a meal? There's no need to disturb you since you're here for business. I'll be okay. When you're done, you can just find me here." Gabriel shook his head as he replied. Jack nodded and didn't force him. After all, it seemed that Gabriel had fallen in love with the Eurocopter and wanted to continue playing with it. Since Gabriel was familiar with the people here, they arranged Jack's means of transportation and Jack hurried towards Cloudy Hotel. Of course, since this was his first time, he didn't know where it was located unless he looked at the map. As the driver of the Lamborghini Urus pointed as he talked about the streets that they were passing, Jack listened carefully, and not long after that, he decided that he would make himself familiar with this city. Not long after, the car arrived in front of a magnificent building. The name, Cloudy Restaurant, was very eye-catching.